Here's the Deal is brought to you by Time Money Management. Our network minus your time equals makes you money. You served your country faithfully. Now it's time to blaze your own path. Here's the Deal is a show for veterans by veterans to discuss real world issues on how to start and run your own business. It's a cross between Dave Ramsey, Maria Bartiromo, and Joe Rogan. This is not academia. It's the truth. Here's the deal. Hey, everybody, how's it going? It's your host, Chris Flowers. Here's the deal. As you know, what we try to do here on the show is that we're trying to not only encourage people to start their own businesses, but we also try to give them like the proper tools to set up the businesses and do it right. So even if you're already in business, you know, this could be a good learning tool as well, because we have subject matter experts on that can help give you guidance in certain directions. So this episode, we're going to cover two really important, yet very overlooked topics, okay? The operating agreement inside of an LLC, something that gets overlooked all the time. And, you know, everybody, you know, thinks you're going to do deals on a handshake, and it never works out. And then, of course, there's also the proper maintenance. You have to maintain an LLC. You have to maintain your LLC or corporation documents like you maintain your car. You got to change the oil, you got to do all that kind of stuff. So I would like to introduce the Here's the Deal audience to Trisha Lotzer. She's a business broker. She's a friend of mine. She's a business broker who owns Liongate Business Brokerage, but she's also an attorney with, is it Copio Legal, Trisha?
Yes, exactly, Chris. Copio Legal.
Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to give you guys a little, you know, inside baseball here. Trisha and I are like, we're such excellent golfers that like we scared a group of attorneys away. They didn't want to golf with us. Okay, because they knew we were that good, and I think we probably shot the lowest score in Top Golf history. I don't think anybody could really top the score that we did. Wouldn't you agree with that, Trisha? I kind of would.
I stipulate completely that it's completely accurate. I don't think anybody's ever had that kind of top golf score as we did.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, when you can scare a whole law office of attorneys away that were supposed to be there, they were supposed to show up and didn't, I think they just knew. They knew they were going to get hustled because, you know, I personally think that they just felt that they were going to get hustled. So they were, I think they were smart. I think they kept away. So now, Trisha, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Stop me if you heard this before, okay? You got two lifelong friends. They're sitting there. They're drinking beer. They decide, hey, you know what? Let's go into business, bro. Me and you, 50-50. We'll split everything down the middle. Life is great, right? And they don't have any kind of an operating agreement whatsoever in place. And, you know, one guy's doing like 99% of the work. The other guy's out golfing. And, you know, two lifelong friends. And now they hate each other. Okay, businesses, you know, they want to either like sell the business, or the business isn't going well, or they're saying, hey, you know, I'm not going to pay enough money because you're not doing any of the work. And so they, you know, they've got two lifelong friends. They can't stand each other now. And then this is where the legal fights are going to come in. This is where you got to pay Trisha a whole bunch of money. Okay, which of course she likes that part, but to get this done, I mean, so, you know, I think if we've seen it once, Trisha, I think we've seen it like 1,000 times. So from an attorney standpoint, of course, you know, you're the legal expert here on the show. How important is it to have the details really ironed out on the operating agreement? And, you know, I mean, as far as like, you know, who's going to do what, the comp, everything in general. I mean, from the legal standpoint, why don't you go, you know, explain that to us as the business owners, how crucial it is.
Sure, Chris. Thank you. And first of all, I want to compliment you. You've been even as much a pleasure to do business with on deals as when we've been golfing together. It's been great doing business with you.
It's never boring. Either one of them is never boring, right?
we have worked on some interesting deals together so far. So, and I love the idea of giving these resources to people to help them succeed. And then also, before I dive into that question, just a quick disclaimer. Consider this friendly advice. Well, I am an attorney. It's not legal advice because it's not specific to anybody's case, but it's general friendly advice I give to a friend, and advice I enjoy talking to you about, Chris. So I heard a lot in your question, and I'm going to start by unpacking it with, you're totally correct. It's super important to have an operating agreement, including but just not limited to compensation. But I have heard the very fact scenario that you're mentioning. I've heard it. I've worked on deals this week that match that scenario. So it's really important to have things in writing. And but that's not just the only thing to have in an operating agreement. Do you want me to go on with what they might want to have in an operating agreement besides
Well,
that?
yeah, I think we got to kind of get into some of those details. We don't want, want to keep it kind of at the 30,000 foot view, but at the same time, it's, like I said, what we've seen, I know you've seen it, I know I've seen it, is that it's not specified who's going to do what or what
Yeah,
expectations are going to be met. So, so and so, if you have two partners, you'll say, okay, we're agreeing to, okay, you're going to handle this portion of the business. You're more the books portion of the business. I'm more the sales portion of the business, or whatever. And you are going to be expected to perform at X level. I'm going to do Y level, and our goal is to, maybe sell the company at 10 times X or whatever, and how we're going to split that when that happens, and so on. And if there is a breakup, who's going to get what assets. And I mean, usually
exactly.
none of that is spelled out anywhere, and it occurs into this whole legal battle of who's supposed to get what. And oh, we're supposed to be 50-50, and you haven't done any of the work, but all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, you're exactly right. There are so many things that are helpful to have in an operating agreement, including, as you mentioned, preparing for, if they sell the LLC, or spousal disclaimers and estate planning terms. There's a reason that operating agreements run at least 30, 40 pages for multiple member LLCs, because I like your initial analogy about, giving your car a tune-up or an oil change. Think of an operating agreement like the instruction manual fixing your vehicle anytime something goes wrong. You may not have to know how to fix the check engine light, but if it goes on, it'll tell you what you need to do. That's what a good LLC operating agreement does, is it spells out what people need to do in different situations, and you're agreeing to it ahead of time to save a lot of time and money down the line.
exactly. So, what kind of details can the business owners work out prior to that? I know, like I said, there's like I said, this can go, like I said, it could be a 30-page document, but are there,
Mhm.
maybe just give us like a few like of the top things that really absolutely must be in a proper operating agreement to make sure that everything's, the expectations are set properly. And like I said, there's an exit strategy. I mean, even things like key man insurance, because like I said, because two buddies can get into business together, everything's rocking and rolling, life is good, one guy dies, and then you know the trophy wife comes in who doesn't know, or husband or whoever comes in, doesn't know anything about the business, think, oh, okay, well, now I'm part owner, I want to do this. Wrong. We're not doing that. And then it turns into that, and that turns into a whole ugly thing. So like, what would you say, like maybe like the top 5 things that absolutely must be in an operating agreement to make sure that it's squared away?
Oh, that's a great question, and also a challenging one to answer, because in any situation they're going to want to have in the operating agreement, and well written, whatever problem it is that's making them pull out the operating agreement in the first place. And chances are it's going to be one of these things, something to do with compensation. And I would love to give, in a few minutes, perhaps a scenario around compensation that I see comes up, and one way to handle it in advance before any problems arise. So compensation, one thing you want to make sure is addressed in the operating agreement. And then what to do in any of the big D's: divorce, death, disability, or need to dissolve the LLC.
There you go.
Yeah. And then you mentioned, spousal disclaimers. If something happens to one of the owners, all of a sudden you could be running it with somebody's spouse or family member, or, and
Kids,
there's a way
or
to
yeah,
handle.
yeah.
Yeah. And if that's not what the parties intend, it can be a very uncomfortable situation. Um, In addition, I like to include the party's choice of mediation, arbitration, or litigation. Kind of the default is if it's not mentioned, you guys are potentially subject to litigation. But I think a lot of people would agree that it's nice to have a mediation and arbitration clause in the LLC operating agreement so everybody can have an arbitration instead of having to show up in county court.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, yeah, like I said, what was it again? What was how many was it? 3 or 4 Ds, or what were those again? Those are great.
Oh, yeah, four. It's a divorce, death, disability, or dissolving the LLC.
Yeah, those are awesome. Yeah, those are, like I said, those should be some of your top things, because that can get into that could cover quite a bit of the problems that we see a lot in these LLCs. So, and then once a company's up and running, like, okay, you got a couple people, a couple ladies, running a shop or something like that, and then as things start growing and progressing and things like that, wouldn't you also recommend maybe updating the operating agreements? Because now we're talking about maybe we're going to start getting into like profit sharing and things like that. So isn't that something you should occasionally take a look at and get tuned up, as we were talking about?
Absolutely. Ideally, you're going to schedule an annual meeting, and that's a great time to check in on different things and updating any exhibits that are supposed to be updated in the operating agreement, or scheduling a check-in call with your attorney. I like to encourage my clients to check in with me, especially if things are going great, once a year. And I say especially because sometimes situations around who owns what come up when the company starts to make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So check in with me and we can make sure that everything is still up to date. And if there are any additional agreements, there are other agreements that are very important to have for your LLC that are outside the scope of our focus of this chat about LLCs and operating agreements. So, by the way, spoiler alert, my best advice in all of this is continue to learn through programs like this, books, but having a really good business attorney who knows you, knows your business, cares about you and your business, and maybe has even owned, bought, or sold a business of your own, who you want to look for to have on your team as an advisor. So again, friendly advice, that's some of my best friendly advice.
Okay, whatever you're doing with the phone, keep it right there, because that was the clearest we've heard your voice so far. So that's great. So what can we do? I mean, I don't know. Let's go into a couple of different scenarios. So, I mean, obviously, if the operating agreement is written properly and somebody's not pulling their weight, then there's some accountability. But is there anything that can be done if you got, let's say, a couple buddies go into business and they're supposed to be 50-50 partners, but one of them is really not pulling his weight, and then one of them gets like fed up with it. Okay, dude, like, you are not doing anything for this company. Is there anything, the partner who is driving the deal, is there any way to hold the other partner accountable, or is it, I mean, just it is what it is? Or is there anything that they can do to work that out?
You broke up a little bit there, but it sounds like you were asking about a situation I see, unfortunately, somewhat frequently, where one partner is doing a bunch of work in the business and the other isn't, for whatever reason. And usually they each have their reasons for why what they're doing is right, and that may be so, but the issue is money and how money is being divided coming out of the company. And this is an opportunity for me to share something that has been a helpful way to prevent these kind of disputes from arising, and that's to make sure in the operating agreement it's well written out what the roles and duties are, and to acknowledge duties separate from being just the owner or a director or an officer in the LLC. But if you're also providing day-to-day management duties, have a separate written employment contract and a separate salary assigned to that role. and be really clear about it. And then update that employment agreement or contractor agreement, as the case may be, but be very clear about the difference between your job description as somebody working in the business as opposed to someone who just owns the business.
Okay, that's something I hadn't even thought about. That's kind of cool. I guess I'll go back to like my original question. I'm sorry it broke up on you, but I was wondering, is there anything that the person can do? Let's say they don't have a solid operating agreement, but there is one person that is pulling 90% of the weight. Is there any way that person can hold the other person who isn't pulling their weight, hold them accountable? Is there any actions that they can take to get them to, adjust their actions? Is there something that they can do?
Sure. There are a few things that they can do, and it's going to depend in part on what any written agreements are. Let's assume maybe worst case scenario, there are no agreements in place, except probably this is what I see. There are some verbal discussions that parties don't agree about. So what do you do then if somebody's doing 90% of the work? Well, that's a good time to start to put things in writing. And hopefully it hasn't progressed to the point where you guys are going to go your separate ways. But if you do, then instead of investing the time in an operating agreement, then it sounds like you might be doing a buy-sell to separate a partnership or an early stage LLC if they have filed their initial papers of incorporation. If there are agreements in place, different story, different outcome perhaps, because then there may be a fiduciary duty that somebody is breaching. But query whether they were breaching a duty as an owner of the LLC or as more in the role of an employee, like I mentioned, and you can just hire somebody to fulfill that role. So I guess to summarize, it's highly fact and document dependent, but if you have some additional facts you want to throw at me, I can help predict what the outcome might look like.
Yeah, I guess like I say, I know there's like so many different ways these things can go. Everything else is a snowflake, of course, so there's no way to kind of cookie cutter nail it down. But I was wondering, maybe something like we talked about, we touched on a little bit earlier, like arbitration. Like, is there?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, both parties have to agree to go to the arbitration, because one partner can say, "Hey, I don't think we're doing what we agreed to do," and so on. Of course, the person can say, "Okay, hey, but hey, well, I don't want to split up the company. I don't want to mess this up. Can we do some arbitration and have a third party tell us, who's doing what and who needs to do what?" I mean, of course, both parties have to agree to that. But is that something that can be done as well?
Yeah, that can be done, and in some cases it might even be what's required if there are written documents for mediation and arbitration. But how I see it done a lot too is I'm working on a deal like that right now. We don't have an arbitrator. Arbitration is great, but then you're additionally paying an arbitrator, and you've probably already got a lawyer. And the other side has a lawyer, and maybe the partnership, the LLC has a lawyer as well. So then, do you want to add to the cost of this and have an arbitrator unless one's absolutely necessary? So right now I'm dealing with a case very much like what we're talking about, and it's just me and the other attorney going back and forth trying to, revise what was a really poorly written purchase and sale agreement that put people in business in an LLC together that have been running the business without any well-written operating agreement. So now we're trying to reasonably reform the deals and give the parties some options for moving forward. Arbitration probably won't be necessary, but it certainly is a good option, especially if it seems the only other option is litigation. And yeah.
The only one that gets happy there is you guys on the legal side, right?
And I'm a transactional attorney. Fortunately, I know some great litigators to call on when parties can't. I'm kind of like good cop, Chris. I'm the transactional lawyer.
You're always the good cop. Yeah, you're always the good cop. No matter what, you always find the sunshine and everything. Like even our golf game, you find a way to make that look good. And I'm like, I can't figure that out, but.
Yeah. So I guess to loop back around to that, yes, arbitration's an option. Also, just, again, talking to that trusted advisor of yours and learning from your attorney, what options do you have under your particular set of circumstances, and, what can lead to the best outcome for everybody.
Awesome. Well, as I know there, like I said, there's so many different things that we can get into and things like that. But it really, what it comes down to is, if you don't have an operating agreement really well spelled out in your current situation, get it there. If you're thinking about starting a business, make sure it gets done in that. And then if you need any help with that, like I said, you can get a hold of Trisha. But one thing, again, another area that you and I have both seen a lot as well. And again, it goes back to the car analogy of like not changing your oil, things like that, is maintaining the LLC. Because, for people that may not know what what an LLC is really designed for, really an LLC is designed for to limit your personal liabilities, so that way things that are business assets stay in the name of the business, and things that are personal assets stay out of that and stay in the personal side. So maybe you can go into the importance of the maintenance of the LLC.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent point, Chris. It's one thing, just to do the initial filing. That's just the start of the LLC, and hopefully you're doing the operating agreement about the same time as you're filing the initial paperwork and agreeing on all those details. But it's important to have other things in place early on, including adequate funding, opening up a separate bank account, getting an EIN, and having this LLC, this limited liability company, this entity operating separately from you and your personal affairs and your expenses. It's important that it has a separate set of books, and also in my practice, I like to give checklists and action items that people can do at yearly basis, so they know they're maintaining the LLC properly.
Yeah, it's excellent, and that is something. When I had my friend Adam on, who's a CPA, we kind of touched on some of those things as far as like commingling funds and make sure you're not, paying your grocery bill out of the business account and things like that. So,
right? Yeah, don't commingle funds. And also, if you have to, few people sign checks, but signing documents, whether electronically or hard copies, signing on behalf of the LLC instead of personally. That's one of the most important things.
And so what can happen if they aren't properly maintained?
Well, there's always the chance that you hear about the phrase piercing the corporate veil, that if you end up in a dispute with a creditor who normally wouldn't be able to go after your personal assets because it's a business expense, they might be able to attach your personal assets. What I see, and that's kind of the textbook answer, right? But what I actually see happen more in my practice is that it isn't a creditor coming after somebody saying you weren't honoring and maintaining the LLC properly. It's one of the LLC owners who wants his partner out.
Really?
Right? So the textbook answer everybody says is piercing the corporate veil. But in real life, what I see is that all of a sudden the LLC starts doing great. One partner doesn't like the way the other partner or the other 4 or 5 number of however many owners there are, and they want more control. They want more ownership and control of the business, if not the entire business. And they will look for a reason like that to push the other parties out. And in some cases, Chris, it's justified. Going back to the scenario of the one person who's doing 90% and the other party who really isn't doing any. So that is why it's so important to have the LLC operating agreement and to be maintaining it and to be referring to it and to have everybody reasonably keeping up with the duties that they've agreed to assume.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it was kind of funny. Popped in my head was I don't know if you watched the Big Bang Theory, and and Sheldon is always pulling out like the roommate agreement and things like that, and going into all the clauses. Anybody who's ever seen the Big Bang Theory, it's crazy. Like I said, me and my son like love that show, but
that sounds brilliant. Yes, it is kind of like that, and it's a little bit also like, in case of emergency, break glass.
mm-hmm.
That most of the time you're not gonna, if everything's going well and nobody's having a problem, you're not gonna pull out the operating agreement, except if you're an A+ student, like once a year to look over everything and talk to your lawyer about it. Otherwise, you will only pull it out when you have a problem and you're reviewing it with an attorney because of the problem. So
I think you would pull it out like a lot, because I sent Trisha over some questions before the show, like, hey, the different things I wanted to cover, and of course she filled everything out like so meticulously, and then like that, I was like, really, like, like apparently, we're like really super casual on Here's the Deal. This is not like Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity or anything. This is like we're just kind of kicking it back and forth, things like that. I mean, she like spelled out every little thing of it. It's like to all these answers. It's kind of funny. Like I said, so I started laughing at myself. So you would do that. I could see you pulling that out. All that you would pull the Sheldon Cooper. You'd be pulling that thing out just to make sure.
Well, I will say this: I do still have a business.
Yes, you do.
Yes, and I'm the only owner, but I still have an operating agreement for that business. And so it's not just for multiple members. And I actually do my best to practice the advice that I preach. As a business owner and a business attorney, I know there are so many details to take care of, and you can't do everything at once. But legitimately, the operating agreement, having it done well at the beginning by somebody who really knows what they're doing, and maintaining it is some of the most just important, solid things for your business.
No, that's cool. And it's important, like I said, because I know even I honestly, being a one person owner myself, I was like, wait a minute, I never even thought about that. It's like, wow. I mean, again, it's again, that's why we have you on the show. It's great. So could get me thinking about a bunch of different things too, other than Big Bang Theory. So,
and golf.
And golf. Yeah. I believe I try to forget about golf all the time as much as I can. It's still like a nightmare for me, but, we'll figure it out. So is there anything, maybe that you're kind of, wanting to talk about that we haven't covered yet, that's, kind of another like really good nugget that we can, give to the either current business owners or aspiring business owners listening to the show?
Yeah. Let me run through a quick list, since you've already revealed that I sent you my answers, which we've kind of just covered on some of these points today.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to make sure that people know that, generally speaking, we're talking about LLCs. They apply to corporations as well, and that's a whole nother discussion we could have at some point. Whether you want an LLC or a corporation, and you're at that point in the process, there's some pros and cons for each. And keep in mind that the tax and tax election are separate from legal formation and maintenance. Watch out for deadlocks. If you've only got one other LLC owner, if you're 50-50, plan ahead on if you guys are at an impasse. What's going to happen?
Yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah, it is a big one. That's something that ends up people, giving me a call, as does this one. When people draft it themselves, and you mentioned this in the first couple of minutes about, legal fees, I can guarantee. I mean, we, at the great firm I'm working at, based in San Francisco, a little boutique business firm, we do flat fee startups for LLCs. People know how much it's going to cost them. And I guarantee right now this week, I'm doing startups at the flat fee, and I'm already exceeded like that amount in the redos of people who drafted their own agreements or had somebody who was a non-lawyer draft their agreements for them, like a
Mm-hmm.
notary. So really, it's much more cost effective to have it done um, well the first time around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, that's the one thing everybody looks at the cost, but how much does it cost you to go into litigation? How much does it cost you to go into arbitration? How much does it cost? It
Yeah,
far exceeds what it would have cost you to start it up the right way the first time. Measure twice, cut once, right? So that's one thing. Like I said, a lot of just people just overlook it so much, and it's
yeah.
if you do, like I said, you're gonna really be pulling out that checkbook here in a minute. But I want to make sure that everybody knows, again, how to get a hold of you, and so like give everybody like your contact information with the firm and stuff like that, and then so that way if they have any questions, they can talk to you about it.
Sure. Yeah. My easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn. My first and last name, Trisha Lotzer, Trisha, last name Lotz as in zebra ER. Copio Legal is the firm that I'm with, based in San Francisco. We're a business law firm working with startups doing formations and a full range of services throughout the business life cycle. I still maintain my Arizona broker's license and work on key business buy-sell deals, high quality, low number through Lionsgate. And a shout out to my operating partner there, Ducat Private Equity. I'm a buy side deal sourcing operating partner with a private equity group. And so if anybody wants to contact me, that's my range of experience.
Excellent. So,
On my,
uh,
as you know, of those I highly recommend doing business with. And it's been a pleasure talking to you.
oh no, yeah, no, I appreciate that a lot. So yeah, so again, I know we talked about a lot of different things here on the show, but again, that's what this podcast is all about. We're trying to give you the tools up front, and if you already started, and we're trying to make sure that you get yourself retooled and do things the right way, so that way when you do grow that business to where it's exceeding all your dreams, we want to make sure that you get out of it everything that you plan to get out of it. And people have listened to the show before have already heard my philosophy is you should have an outside board of directors, and that should be your banker, your CPA, and your attorney.
Yeah.
All three of those people need to come together and share the vision. You give us the vision, we tell you. Trisha tells you how to keep things on the legal side. A good CPA is going to tell you, okay, here's what we could do, and the CPA and the banker got to work together. So okay, you can write off these things, but if you want to buy that building, or you want to sell the company for the pot of gold at the end, we got to work together, because if you write off everything, your balance sheet's going to look terrible, and you're not going to get that pot of gold at the end. So again, have that board of directors, have the big three in place, so that way you are reaching all of your goals and you're satisfying the dream. So thanks again, Trisha, for being on the show. Like I said, we greatly appreciate it, and we'll look forward to having you on again later on.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
In closing, we just like to always close with giving thanks to my personal Savior, Lord Jesus Christ, for saving my life on several occasions, and then also just give me the ability to do the show and like that. So, absolutely everything. So, thank you, Lord, for allowing me to do this, and then also I want to say thank you to my family, my wife and kids, supporting me on this endeavor here as we go in different directions and everything. But I wouldn't have done any of this without my boy, my partner in crime, Mario, outside the wire, Gide, a fallen 360, and his wife Crystal, because he's the one that gave me the kick in the ass to get on the podcast and do this. So if you don't like the show, you blame him because it's his fault. So just in closing, just want to say thanks for everybody for listening. And as we always say at the end, stay tuned, stay focused, stay motivated.